Many of you are already familiar with James's work, but it is my pleasure to introduce James Nottingham. James is the founder of Challenging Learning, an international company. He is a past school leader and teacher, and now he is a regular keynoter alongside folks you might have heard of, like John Hattie and Carol Dweck. Today, he is going to take a closer look at his book, The Learning Challenge, and what it looks like when students embrace challenge. And now I'm going to turn it over to James.
Thank you, Margaret. Good evening or good afternoon to everybody listening. Thank you for joining us. The plan for this session, I'm going to give an insight into some of the ways we can use the PIT. I'm assuming that you have, you're at least familiar with the Learning Challenge. I'm assuming you've got a copy of the book and you've tried different things in that. So the point of tonight or this afternoon for those of you listening in the States is to go a bit deeper with it. I'll be delighted to answer any questions that you have. Please do pop them onto the chat. We're also going to do some polling as well. These are the sorts of things. I'm going to be doing a few activities with you that you could use with your students. Let's go past that cheesy photo of me and straight on to looking at an image of the Learning Challenge or the Learning Pit. As many of you will know, the starting point for the Learning Challenge is typically a concept or an idea. It doesn't have to be a concept. It could be that people go into the pit with a performance or a physical activity or something else that's not conceptual, but very often it's based around a concept or a key idea. Having identified that, then we look to purposefully take students into the pit. Many of you will have heard me talk about the role of challenge and why we ought to convince our students that taking the more challenging path, stepping out of our comfort zone is a good thing for learning. And one of the ways to nail our colours to the mast and to make it very, very clear to our students that we value challenge is through using the learning pit and celebrating when they are wobbling, celebrating when they are struggling, rather than rescuing them, actually celebrating the fact that they are wobbling and not giving up. And that's what I mean by being in the pit. And so the Learning Challenge is about purposefully taking them from that sense of, I know what I'm doing, into that pit, which is where they think, well, there's a lot more to this than I thought. Having explored ideas in the pit, then what happens is people start to gain some clarity and they construct new meaning, new understanding around the ideas that they've been thinking about, and then eventually think about, so what have we learned here? How did I learn it? What did I do to get myself through the pit? And how can I apply that new learning in different situations? So that's an overview, and what I'm going to show you this evening is some of the ways that we can deepen that pit experience. We'll start with some of the ideas that you'll find in Chapter 2 of the Learning Challenge book. I will use some of the examples there, but I've added some new ones in to take it deeper, partly so that we can think a bit more during this session together, and also so that you've got an insight into how these ideas can be best used with your students. The examples that I will use include that when we're going to look at a concept, and we're going to start with the concept of real. Now that's something that's in, we'll go with that. We're then going to look at using examples to create cognitive conflict. We're going to look at the ways in which we can review the understanding and connect our understanding, and then look at ways to consider the learning journey as well. And once we've done that, then we'll look at some of the key parts to chapters 5 and 6. We've got a bit of a lag time going on. Please excuse me, I hope the audio is fine for you, but the images, I was expecting the images to have moved by now, but let's keep moving on, and we'll hopefully the desktop will catch up with us all. You should have a screen now with chapter 2 Good. So the first things first, then, identify a key concept. As you will find in chapter 2, the example, or one of the examples that I've used, is the concept of real. Now that might come out of a picture book, it might come out of an image, it might come out of you asking your students what is real. And I've picked that one because, of course, that works pretty well with any age of students in a school, right the way from, I might even say, preschool, 4 or 5 years old, but certainly 5 or 6, all the way through to post-16 and beyond school. One example is if we put in front of our students 3 apples, or rather we say there are 3 apples, and actually one of them is a juicy apple, one of them is a plastic toy apple, and one of them we say, well, here's an invisible apple as well. And then to say, and how many real apples are there? Now this is the first of the polls that we're going to try. I'm going to ask you to vote on this one. If you were to ask your students that question, and of course you teach different age groups, or you work with teachers who teach different age groups. If you were to ask that question, how many real apples are there, when you put in front of them a juicy apple, a toy plastic apple, and then you say, and there's a third one, it's invisible, how many apples would you say there are just now? And I'm going to so far, a couple more yet to vote. Okay, and 3, 2, 1. Well, there's some last minute voters in there. Right, so I'm going to close the poll, share the results there. Okay, so more than half of you have gone for just one real apple. Quarter of you have gone for 3 real apples. So let's hide the results, go back to this. So that's what we've got in front. That's where we would start with. We lay out 3, and it doesn't have to be apples. Of course it doesn't have to be apples, but you can see where I'm going with this. It's one that we would straight away say, okay, yeah, that's real because it's tangible, it's there, it's juicy, it's what we call. But then there's a replica one, a toy one, and then we're talking about an invisible. And what we're asking the students is, well, how many real apples are there, or how many real toys are there, how many real numbers are there, how many real objects are there, and so on, whatever suits your purpose and whatever age group you've got. The point being, we've identified a key concept, the concept being real. Then what we need to do is to create some cognitive conflict around that, to look at, okay, so we've got our starting point, how do we go deeper? I'm going to now come away from the book a little bit and give you some new examples based around this concept of real, and I hope that gives you a bit more of an insight into what we can do with our students. So now if I were to ask you, notice I've put 2 out of the 3. The invisible apple has disappeared, or rather the outline of the invisible apple. What I'm going to ask you to think about, we're not going to take a poll on this one, I just want you to think about it. Which one is more real out of those 2? And there isn't a poll on this one, it's more to show you how I might develop it a little bit more with the students. So I've started with how many real apples are there, and then they're starting to say such things as, well, there's only 2 because I can only see 2, or, well, no, that there's only 1 because, look, that's a juicy one, I can smell it, but that one's just a toy one. So we might develop it more to ask, well, which one is more real? And then we might move away from the concrete example in front of us to something, to another example in life. So I'm going to show you these 2 images and ask you which one of those is more real. Let me take a moment to think about that. Again, this is not a poll. We're going to go to a poll in the next slide, but which one of those is more real? Because what we're trying to do with the students is to throw doubt into their mind. We're not trying to prove them wrong. We're not trying to say that they don't understand. What we're trying to do is throw some doubt into their mind and cause them to wobble a little bit more, rather than accepting the early answers or the easy answers. It's about trying to get wobble so that they get deeper into the pit. So which one of those is more real? Let's go to a poll. I'm going to give you 3 different images. I'm going to be asking the same question. Which one is more real? There's a toy. There's a pretending to ride a bike, and then there's a robot driving a car. And we are going to go into a poll on this one, and I'm going to ask you which one of those 3 is more real. And I'm giving just 3 options: either the guy pretending to ride his bike, or the robot driving a car. So let's launch that poll now. Incidentally, if you go for option 4 is to say, well, I don't like any of them, I don't think any of them, or I wouldn't want to select one of the 4. So can you vote now, please? One person's quick off the mark. So to remind you, there was number 1 was the Mini, number 2 was the guy pretending to ride a bike, and number 3 was the robot driving a car. And if you go for option 4, that means you don't want to select either 1, 2, or 3, or you have a different answer to that. Okay, so I'm going to close the poll in 10 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, nearly there. 71% have voted. Okay, I'm going to close the poll now and share the results. Okay, so 40%, not quite the majority, but 40% said that the Mini is the one that is more real. Okay, so of course with your students, what you're doing is you're giving them examples, you're asking them questions around the concept of real, or whatever your concept is, but we're using real at the moment. You're giving them examples, and then you're asking them to take a vote and asking them for the reason. So which one is more real? Well, that is more real because it's a real object, whereas the guy is just pretending and the robot doesn't exist, for example. Or they might say, well, no, the guy is real. He's more real because, well, he's a person, he's living. And notice what they're doing there. They're starting to describe characteristics that we can then use later on in our definition of real. So, here's another one for you then, and that is to ask you this question about rainbows. Are they real? And I'm going to give you a little bit of time to think about this, but your options are yes, no, or in a way. And if you go for in a way, which is option 3, then I'm going to ask you to pop a comment into the comments box to explain why you think, in what way it is. And again, it's a bit difficult. We're spread across the world doing this webinar, but if you're with your students in the classroom, then you'd be drawing out these ideas. And notice what I've done. I've used different examples. We started with the 3 apples, and then we talked about, which I showed you an image of a child pretending to be a doctor, and then a doctor listening to a child, and then I showed you 3 different images and which one is more real, and now we're going on to are rainbows real. So we're going to enter into a poll. Are rainbows real? Your options are either yes, no, or in a way. Okay? And then once we've done the poll, I'm going to ask you to put your thoughts down in the chat box. So please vote now. One third of you have voted so far, or half of us have voted so far. Great. Are rainbows real? Yes, no, or in a way. Right, 70% of you. 5 more seconds for the rest of you. 5 more seconds to vote, please. So I'm going to give you a moment now to just pop a reason or a comment into the chat box, would you, please? And I think it's important that when we do this sort of thing with our students, we don't just ask for yes, no answers. Notice I've been giving you yes, no, and not sure, yes, no, in a way, or yes, no, different answer. So I've not been asking for black and white. I've been asking for giving you different options. But I'm asking you now, will you pop down thoughts into the chat box, please? Okay. Questions? I've got a question coming up now. Okay, whilst we're thinking about that, let me share with you some concepts, some questions that we might ask our students. I'm going to close that, hide the results, bring that on. Okay, and now move it on to, so these are the questions. You'll find these in the book. These are the sorts of questions you might ask primary school or elementary school students. Again, take a look at those. Those are to extend their thinking a little bit more, but what we're also trying to do is get them to go further, deeper into the pit. That's the point here, is we're trying to take them into the pit. So we started with something that to them might seem relatively straightforward, how many real apples there are, and very often students will find that they've got an answer straight away, and then what we're trying to do is make that a bit more challenging and get them further into the pit. So those are for elementary, and here are some for secondary high school students. Again, it's all about how do we get them deeper into the pit, and that's what I would ask you to think about, is how do you encourage your students to go further into the pit, not to get upset about it, not to get annoyed by it, but to go further into the pit. We're going to take, I'm going to show you concept table now. This is the sort of thing that either you might present as a whole table to your students, or indeed what you might have actually is a set of examples in your mind that you're going to share with them. And what we're trying to do is explore that concept of, in this example we've chosen, real. So we're going to do a few quick polls. Your options are 1, it's real, 2, it's not real, or 3, I'm not sure. And the first question in that table is toy animal. So is a toy animal real, not real, or not sure? Could you vote now, please? And we've got 1 vote for real. A few votes for real already. Another 10 seconds. 10, 9, 8. Oh, it's up to 50-50 now. No, it's split 44, 44, 11%. Keep going, please. We've got 5 seconds more. 3, 2, 1. And we'll close the poll now. Share the results. Okay, so it's a pretty even split on that one. Let's go back to the original table. So what about a dead animal? Real, not real, or not sure? Let's run that one. We won't do all 7 of these, but we'll do a few more. Let's go for it. A dead animal. Real, not sure. Please vote now. Give you 10 more seconds so we can get a couple more in. I'm giving that extra time just for technology lag. 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, I'm going to close the poll now. One's just got 2 people, 2 more snuck in there. Okay, and share the results. Well, that's real. Okay, that's interesting. So if we go back to that, the original table, a toy animal, we had a pretty even split, 1/3, 1/3, 1/3, but then everybody's saying it's real. What about the unborn animal now? This might be a bit contentious, and of course I would be using this more with secondary students than with primary, although it might be appropriate with some of the older elementary students. But let's just do that one and see what people say tonight. Let's launch that poll. An unborn animal, real, not sure. Please vote now. Five seconds left. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, going to close the poll now. And again, we've 100% on that one by the looks of it. Yep, there we go, 100% on that one. So everybody's saying it's... What about this one, though? Your memories of an animal. That's idea F. Your memories of an animal. That's we'll skip to that one. Your memories of an animal. Go on to that poll. Please take a vote now. Okay. Five seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, so we've got a few people they're not sure, which is interesting. And so again, with your students, we'd be looking for reasons why they think this, why they think it's real, why it's not real. And what we're looking to do is to challenge their notions, not to say they're wrong. This is really important. The pit is not about trying to prove students wrong. If you imagine that you're driving your car, you're driving a very familiar route, it's really easy for you. You don't have to think about it. You're just driving, let's say, from home to work. You do start thinking about it, though, if that normal route is blocked. And then if your backup route is blocked, you think even more. And that's the point of this, is to block students' normal route or to block students' answers, because we want them to think more. We don't want to say you're wrong. What we want to do is get them to think, oh, well, maybe, possibly, it might be something else. Okay, so we've explored different examples there. Let's just go to one more set of polling, and then I'll give you some of the theory behind this and some of the techniques that we can use to really get students into the pit. So if you are working with younger students, you might start with 2 hoops or 2 circles like this. One represents real and one represents pretend. But of course, with older students, you might go for the more traditional Venn diagram look, where there's overlapping hoops. So of course the hoop on the left is real, the hoop on the right is pretend, but the overlap is where something is real and pretend all at the same time. So if we, and we're going to go to a poll in a minute, and if you go for option 1, that means you think it is real only. If you go for option 3, you think it is pretend only. If you go in the middle, if you think it's both real and pretend all at the same time, then you go for option 2. And then option 4 is, well, it's neither real nor pretend. So to review that before I give you the examples, if you vote for 1, it means it's real. If you vote for 2, it means real and pretend. If you vote for 3, it's pretend only. 4, it is neither. So think about that for a minute. Computer games. Where would you put computer games in the Venn diagram? We'll go to a vote in a moment. Let me just give you a couple more examples so you can see where I'm going with this. Another example is sport, and one more example is okay, it's just gone very, very slow a minute. Are we there? Okay. So, computer games. Are computer games real and pretend, just pretend, or neither? one of it. Let's go to computer games, launch the poll now. Can you vote now, please? Going to give you 10 more seconds just to allow the technology to catch up with us. We've got an 80-20, oh no, we've got votes for each category so far. 3 seconds, 2, 1, close the poll, share the results. Interesting. So with my students, I would love to find out a bit more about that. You can imagine how much dialogue you can get from this. So computer games, it's something that a lot of them, not all of them, but a lot of them are really interested in. What do you mean by those of you who said that they're real and pretend, which is half of you? Why do you say real and pretend all at the same time? How is that possible to be real and pretend all at the same time? 1/3 of you said well, it's pretend only, and then we've got the others saying real. So why would you say that? How is it different from what somebody else has said? Are you persuaded by what they are saying? We're not trying to convince anybody that they're wrong. We're not trying to get into debate where one side is right and another side is wrong. What we're trying to do is get into exploration, finding out, trying to understand each other a bit more. So let's hide that poll and let's go back to that. Look at those examples that I've put in front of you. We'll take one more poll out of those. I think we might just go for the most abstract one in that first list and first set, and that is time. What about time? Is it real? Is it real and pretend? Is it pretend or is it neither? Let's do a poll on that one. Time. Launch the poll. This is your final set of voting, and then I'll talk to the theory. So, got about a quarter of you voted so far. It's pretty unanimous at the minute. Interesting going in. Oh, we're starting to split, going against some of the most illustrious philosophers through the ages. Time is a purely construct. Okay, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and we close that. So, share the results on that one. As you can see, vast majority of us this evening are saying it is real, but there's a few saying pretend and a few saying neither. Again, I'd love to know more if those were my students. If we were sat in a room together, I'd love to know more from you too about why you voted as you did. Okay, so I hope you found that interesting to think about in terms of what is real and what's not. Let me give you some examples of what I would do next. So to remind you, I've identified a key concept. I've used the example of real, but there are dozens upon dozens of concepts in the book. I think it's chapter 4 in the book. You'll find lots and lots and lots of examples from different curricular areas. We've also got some new lesson plan books coming out that take different concepts and go into them deeply. Lots from literature, lots from citizenship, lots from language, maths, science, and so on. So we've identified a key concept. We've put something in front of them, something relatively concrete. So I went for a juicy apple, a plastic apple, and then I said there's an invisible apple, and I asked the students how many real apples are there. Then what I wanted to do is take them deeper into it and get them further forward in terms of getting into the So well, not just how many real ones are there, but which one is more real. And then I gave you some examples of that, and then try to think of an example that is an interesting one, and that's where I went for the rainbow. We've looked at the concept table, Venn diagrams. Another one that you might want to think about is using a concept line. Notice exactly the same examples as I showed you for the Venn diagram. And I would not be thinking of using the Venn diagram and the concept line in the same lesson. I'm giving you options here, so you might pick one. You might use the Venn diagram in one lesson and then opinion line for a different concept in a different lesson. But to show you how the concept line works, so we've got real at one end and we've got not real at the other. And then I would ask my students to place those particular ideas on the concept line. So for example, they might put role play over there. So they're saying that role play is pretty much not real. It's not right at the very end, but it's way, way over to that right-hand side. Whereas, for example, they might put photographs kind of in the middle that, and they might explain it in terms of, well, it's an image of a real thing. And then others might argue, well, actually, you can make photographs that look very different from reality. And then the others will come back and say, well, yes, but it still started as a real thing. It's just that you put different effects on it to make it look different. Maybe made it black and white, or you've increased the saturation. You know, kids are very tech savvy these days with all the different photo apps. So they start to challenge each other. They start to question each other, which is exactly what we want them to do. So, having gone through all of that, I'm going to ask you final vote. Here we go. It's back to that original question. So, how many apples, real apples, are there? And I would ask you to vote now, either 1, 2, 3, or you're going to say, well, actually, no, I'm going to go with other, and I would love to know what that other is. We haven't seen any questions coming up in the chat yet, or at least I haven't. I don't know whether technology is letting us down, or or you haven't got questions at the moment, but let's go to that final poll. So you either go for there's 1 apple, there's 2 apples, there's 3 apples, or you want to say there's 4 is a different answer. Okay, final vote. Take your vote now, please.
I just want to let you know that people aren't finding the chat button, so they're writing their responses in the questions box. So if you look in the question box.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, great, okay. Where is the chat box? That's a good question, Julie. Sorry about that. Okay, great. Right. So let's close that poll. I'll give you 5 seconds more, and then we'll have a look at these. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Let's close the poll on that one. Share the results. Okay, so that's changed since we started. Again, that's a good thing, and I would get my students to reflect on that. Why have you changed? And that's not to suggest that was a bad thing, of course, nor is it to suggest it's a good thing. It's just a thing. And to get your students to explore those reasons why. Did you change your mind? Have you maybe become more unsure, or maybe you become more sure about it? But it's interesting that the results have changed. So let's hide the results on there. Julie, in a way, rainbows are real depending on your angle of view, your location, the weather in your vicinity. Michelle, I've witnessed rainbows after a rainstorm. I said in a way because our eyes really see the colours, but in another way they're not, because they are not tangible. Okay, so these comments that you're making are great, and exactly what I would be hoping my students might come up with, because notice the terms there that we're using: tangible, colors, I seeing them scientifically. So Cami said rainbows are real. As you can prove their presence scientifically, you can prove their existence and the reason why you can see them. So we're getting some really good terms here that we can then use later on to construct our understanding. So depending on your angle of view, witness, tangible, interesting, yeah. And then Julie's just raised the point, so interesting, it seems twice the early responders said one thing and then the later responders chose a different answer. That is interesting, Julie, and it's something that happens with students as well. I think good on the people. I'm really pleased for the people who will just shoot from the hip. That's how I'm thinking it just now, and then others will be a bit more methodical. They might think, okay, let's just hang back and see what other people are saying. And of course, some people are contrarian, in a good way contrarian. They want to say something different to other people. I'm not suggesting that's happening tonight, but it might be. It's all about trying to get our students to see that the world is full of different views, and there's also, if we go back to the rainbows thing, you see things from a different angle as well. And that's what I wanted to do with the pit. That's what I wanted to create, was this sense of, that's exactly who we should be. We should be open-minded. We should be open to the thoughts and ideas of others. That's not to say we should accept those ideas, but it is about being open to the possibility that there are these other ideas. And it's okay to wobble. It's okay to struggle, because that's when learning happens. If we hadn't thought about real, well, there's going to be no learning about real. If we don't listen to other people and their thoughts, then we're not going to learn much. We'll stick with our own ideas, which I'm not saying that's a bad thing to have our own ideas. Of course, it's not a bad thing. But the pit is all about this exploration. Now, we've spent about 40 minutes on this, partly because I've been explaining things, partly because I've been struggling, if you pardon that phrase, with the technology. But you might have done that in 10 minutes with your students, because you wouldn't have done all of those examples. You would have picked 2 or 3 of those examples, which I think is... it's entirely up to you. I'm putting a smorgasbord in front of you, if you like, and you would pick 1 or 2 of them for this purpose, and then the next time you do it with students, you'd pick a different technique. It'd be to go along with a different concept. So let's press on. We've got them into the pit. We've got them thinking a lot about different aspects of the concept. Now what we want to do is help them to construct understanding. So one example, one way to do that would be to get your students to reflect back on the characteristics or the terminology that they've been using up until now. So the terminology that my students used recently, I was asking them about real. Now this is, I would have different age students, but so with 9-year-olds, the sorts of answers they were coming up with was, well, real is something, if I can see it. Some of the 13, 14-year-olds I was working with, they're saying, well, if somebody tells me it's real. And they didn't mean just anybody. They didn't mean their friend necessarily. They meant Stephen Hawking, for example. If he tells us that there's a black hole, then there is a black hole. Or if a religious leader tells me, or if my parents tell me, then I'm going to believe them, and therefore I think it's real. Other kids saying, well, no, if I can touch it. If I can't touch it, then it can't be real. And it doesn't necessarily mean me touch it, but humankind perhaps, if they can touch it. Others saying, well, I just know it's real. And that's a fascinating one to get into. Well, what do you mean by you know it's real? How do you know it's real? What causes you to know that it is real? We use our professional judgment here. We're sensitive to students. We don't want to be pushing them down the line of them thinking that whatever they've been told by their parents is wrong. Of course not. That's not the point here. The point is just to get them to be a bit more introspective and a bit more thoughtful. An interesting way to do it is you could introduce them to ranking. Now I've used the example here of a diamond rank, but you could use a straight line. It wouldn't have to be 9 different options. There could be just 3 different options. But with a diamond rank, what you get your students to do is, if at the moment I've given you 4 examples of real, well then I might just do a diamond with 4. So I've got which is the most significant idea. I put that at the top. Which are the next 2 most significant ideas there, both at second equal, and then which is the one that's at the bottom there, the third or least significant idea. Out of those 4, which one is the most important part of real? Another option, again, I'm not suggesting you do all of these. I'm giving you a smorgasbord here to choose from. It's all in the book, but I'm trying to give you some different examples and worked examples as well. So if they've come up with a definition, they've been through the pit, they're now coming up with a definition that they think, oh, okay, I know what real is. If I go back to our questions box, so they might be saying things such as, we can feel it. Aldina here says, I voted yes because it is visible. Comparing it to air, we feel it even though we can't see it. So we can't see it, visible, comparing. We've got scientific, we've got existence, we've got presence, we've got tangible. These are words that will then go into your student's working definition. I mean, a lot of people will say to me, okay, so I understand how to get students into the pit, but how do I get them out of the pit? And the main thing is reflect back on the language that has been used, reflect back on the answers that students have given and say, so what have we said so far? Let's think about that. And let's piece together an answer using some of the phrases, some of the ideas that people have given. So concept circles work pretty well for this as well. So in the middle, you put your concept. That's the circle in the middle. And then round the next circle is those are the things that you're not quite sure about. And then round the outside is the opposite to the concept. Okay. So that I give you a few of the techniques for getting in the pit, let's just finish this part off. Having constructed an answer, and please don't think that the constructing an answer is about getting your perfect answer, because, well, where is the perfect answer? I don't know. You might say there's a perfect answer for an exam, but we're talking more here about understanding of their world, understanding of life, as the great Matthew Lipman said, who created Philosophy for Children. He said, if you can imagine that each subject or curriculum area is a brick in a wall, what we're looking to do here is to provide the mortar, allow students the opportunity to make links between the different subjects, through different school subjects and curriculum areas. So it's all about making links. It's not about having the rote learned definition. It's about exploring those. So let's go now to thinking about the examples that we've come up with. Where do they fit into the concept circles, but also get your students to think about, can you think of any examples that contradict your definition? Because we're trying to get them to be self-analytical and open to critique on this. Having done that, the fourth and final stage is then to think about the learning journey, and you'll find lots of examples in the book, but basically we're starting with a couple of questions to do with what did you think at the beginning, then we're looking at what caused you to get into the pit, and what did you think when you were in the pit, then we're thinking about what helped you to come out of the pit, and how do you know that you didn't accept really easy answers. Now that we're getting out of the pit, what are we left with, and what strategies have we used that we can apply next time? Okay, let's now think about some of the techniques we can use to get into the pit. You'll find a lot of this in chapter 5. This is the thing that people seem to get most out of, often the thing that people struggle a little bit with at the beginning, but this is the thing that they often get most use from. I call them wobblers. By wobblers, I mean causing students to wobble a bit. They've gone from being pretty sure to wobbling quite a lot. If A equals B, then does B equal A? A is the concept that you're dealing with. So in this example here, it's real. B is what students reply. So if you say what is real, they might say something is real if I can see it. All you do then is take it and turn it around. Does that mean that something I can see is real? For example, what about a magic trick? I can see a magic trick. Does that make it real? And they'll typically say, oh no, that's not real. That's trickery. Okay, so what is real? What about I can see a smile. A smile's always real? And then your students will say something such as, well, no, sometimes you put a brave face on it. Sometimes you're feeling really miserable, but you smile so that nobody asks you any questions. What about a rainbow? And we've explored that earlier on. The one that often gets kids these days is, well, what about augmented reality? And you just have to mention Pokemon Go. They're with you. They know exactly what you mean, and then they start saying, well, no, that's not real. It's not real. Well, yes, it is real because it's a game. So it's a real game, and we can see it, and people say, yeah, but it's not there, is it? And they get really into it. And all I've done is I've asked them, what is this? And in this example, this is real. What is real? And they say real is something that I can see. So all I say is, does that mean if I can see it, it's real? The alternative to that one is the negative version of it. So if A equals B, then if it's not B, is it not A? So again, the concept is real. They're saying I can see it. So what do you say? You say, well, does that mean if I can't see it, it's not real? For example, and here's a few examples that you might use. Gravity, we can't see it, but we know it's there. We can feel it, I suppose, but you can't see it. Your mind, long lost friends, we can't see them, but does that mean they're not real? Rare animals that maybe nobody's seen. These are ways to get students into the pit. Here's another example, and this one works brilliantly. I really, really recommend that you use this, and that is, what's the difference between? What's the difference between? You've got a concept, you then compare that concept with another one. For example, what's the difference between music and noise? Imagination and dreams, zero and nothing. You can see there's some math examples coming in there. All these examples here. Notice what I've done is I've taken the concept and then I've compared it with something connected, and that might be an antonym, it might be a synonym. I can't overstate how that question is, what's the difference between? I I really, really recommend you use it to get students into the pit. Okay, so I'm going to pause there because we're almost out of time. I want to make sure there's chance to any questions at all. If you do have any questions, please just pop them into the questions box. I'm sorry I've been rattling through these last few, and I'm going to just show you a couple of examples whilst people are thinking of their questions. I would recommend you think about friends, get your students to think about friends. Remember what you're asking them is ask them what a friend is, and these are the sorts of things that students say. Friends are someone I tell secrets to, and you're going to use if A equals B, then does B equal A, or you're going to use the not B. So if a friend is somebody I tell secrets to, does that mean if I tell you a secret, you are my friend? Or you could use the not B. If a friend is somebody I tell secrets to, does that mean if I don't tell secrets, then they're not my friend? They'll say a friend is somebody I hang out with. Again, what are you going to say? A friend is somebody I hang out with. Does that mean someone I hang out with is my friend? For example, we hang out with different people at school. We hang out with the teachers in the sense that we're in the same class for an hour or two together. Does that mean we're friends? Or if we don't hang out with them, does that mean we're not friends? So I don't see my friends for a couple of weeks. Does that mean we're no longer friends? Friends are people who like the same things. Does that mean someone who likes the same things? And friends, for example, go to a sports match. Everybody's there to see the same sport. They like the same sport. Does that mean we're all friends? You can see what we're doing here is just taking it and turning it, taking it, turning it, and adding an example. These are some other examples that students give. How about this one with courage? What is courage? Let's say courage is doing something that frightens you. What do you say in response? Does that mean if you do something that frightens you, you're being courageous? For example, it would frighten me to run across a busy road. Does that mean I'm being courageous? And the kids will say, no, that's stupid. Okay, so what's the difference between being courageous and being stupid? If courage is about not crying, courage is about standing up for others, courage is about facing your fears, courage is about saying no. All of these, whatever your students are saying, you take it, turn it, add an example, and you will be able to get your students into the pit. I'll very quickly give you these couple of other examples. What about a river? What is a river? Well, a river is water that flows downhill. Does that mean water that flows downhill is a river? For example, if I take a jug of water and pour it down a hill, does that make it a river? Sort of, they'll say. Well, what do you mean sort of? Is it a river or not? Well, no, not really. It has to be natural. For example, so they might say it has to flow from the mountain to the sea, or it has to be natural. And again, you're taking it and turning it and adding an example. Last thing to share with you before we finish is use this convention as well, always or never. If you put that in, that will help your students to really struggle with it. And that's the point. We're trying to get them to question, we're trying to get them to think. So for example, does a river always have water? I mean, there are dry riverbeds. I mean, is that still a river? What about if the river's dried up? Does courage mean never crying? Should you always be nice to your friends? Should you never trust a stranger? It often gives a different aspect to it. And I hope what you've got from tonight is that this is about playing with ideas. And I don't mean playing in terms of the nonchalant who cares. I mean playing in terms of having fun, going on playful adventures. I love the fact that Lego the word Lego comes from two Danish words, to play well, and that's what we're trying to do here. We're trying to play well with ideas so that our students are happy to get into the pit and are prepared to get into the pit. In terms of constructing meaning, get your students to go back over the things that they've said and say, well, these are all the things that we've said, these are all the things that we've explored. So can we make a definition out of that? Friends are, and what, we've got 6 examples there. Can you make a definition out of those, or add some other ones, or rank them and put the most important ones at the top? What about courage? We've explored courage now. These are some of the things that we've said thus far. Can we create some definitions from that? And then you'll find these learning pit examples here. I'm sorry, that might be a bit small if you've got if you're looking at a small screen, but there's the sorts of questions you can ask to get your students to review the learning pit. Thank you, Bonnie, for your comment there about enjoying the concept, the examples. I hope it does help. As a principal, we can use it with our staff as well, and I think actually we need to demonstrate that and be willing to be in the pit with our staff. And when things are a bit of a struggle, we can say, look, we're in the pit and that's okay. Let's not give up. Let's not worry about it. Let's get into the pit together. You can use it for professional development. We can think about, okay, what is teaching, or what is learning, or what is professional development, what is professional integrity, what is courage. These are all sorts of terms that we can really enjoy with our colleagues. Folks, I hope you've found that useful. Sorry I rattled through that last little bit, but I know this has been recorded, and I'm going to make these slides available as well. Corwin can let you know about that, but I'll also get them onto the Challenging Learning website. That's challenginglearning.com, and I'm sure they'll go on to the Corwin site as well, so you can get hold of these slides, or contact me directly if you can't find them. I'm James at challenginglearning.com. So I'm going to stop there and pass you over to Margaret. I think you're on now. It's midnight where I am, so I'm going to get that glass of wine that's been staring at me the whole time and say thank you to everyone being with us.
Thank you, and especially at that time of night. But I just wanted to let you all know that, yes, we have recorded this. We'll be sharing the recording and the slides, as James said. And if you're interested in learning more, I did want to let you know of some upcoming Corwin Institutes where James will be keynoting. There's a Visible Learning Institute in Salt Lake City, Utah, June 11th to June 12th. And then he will also be at our 2018 annual Visible Learning Institute in Chicago, and that is July 8th to July 11th. So thank you. Thank you, James, and thank you for everyone who participated.
Thank you.